300 men stood between an empire and the rest of the known world. They knew they would not survive the week. They stayed anyway. This is the story of the Spartan army, not the myth, not the movie, but the real machine of iron discipline that turned a small, dry stretch of land in southern Greece into the most feared fighting force of the ancient world. By the 5th century BC, Sparta had built something no other Greek city-state had dared to attempt. Every free-born Spartan boy was taken from his family at age 7 and enrolled in a brutal state training system called the Agoge. He wasn't raised to be a farmer, a merchant, or a poet. He was raised to be a soldier and nothing else. Food was rationed on purpose. Boys were encouraged to steal to survive, and punished not for stealing, but for getting caught. Shoes were optional. Beds were reeds pulled from a nearby river, torn by hand, no knife allowed, so the reeds could never be sharp enough to soften. The goal wasn't cruelty for its own sake. The goal was to build men who could withstand anything and still hold a line. And hold a line is exactly what they did. The Spartan army fought in a formation called the phalanx, rows of men locked shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, spears bristling forward like a wall of iron thorns. A Spartan shield didn't just protect him, it protected the man to his left. Break formation, and you didn't just risk your own life, you exposed your entire unit. That single idea that the group mattered more than the individual is the key to understanding everything that made Sparta different. Other Greek cities used citizen soldiers who trained occasionally and returned to their trades. Sparta had something closer to a permanent professional army, centuries before the concept existed almost anywhere else. While Athenians debated philosophy in the Agora, Spartan men in their 20s and 30s were still training, still drilling, still living in communal barracks, even after marriage. It produced soldiers so effective that the mere sight of the Spartan red cloak could reportedly make an enemy hesitate. But there's a question underneath all of this that most retellings skip entirely. How did a city with a shrinking population of full citizens, at its peak, maybe 8,000 adult male Spartans, a number smaller than a mid-sized modern high school, manage to dominate the battlefield for so long? The answer isn't just training. It's a system built on control, fear, and an entire class of people the Spartans depended on and feared in equal measure. To understand Spartan power, you have to understand who was doing the farming while Spartan men trained for war. The answer was the helots, a subjugated population, likely descendants of conquered Messenians, who outnumbered their Spartan masters by as much as 7 to 1. They worked the land, grew the food, and kept the entire Spartan economy running. Without them, no Spartan man could afford to spend his life training instead of farming. And the Spartans knew exactly how dangerous that math was. Every year, according to the historian Plutarch, Spartan magistrates formally declared war on the helots, not as a metaphor, an actual declaration, a legal ritual that meant any Spartan citizen could kill a helot at any time without consequence. Young Spartan men were sent out in secret bands called the Crypteia, moving through the countryside at night, sometimes tasked with eliminating helots who seemed too strong, too clever, or too likely to lead a revolt. This wasn't paranoia without cause. In 464 BC, a massive earthquake struck Sparta, killing thousands and leveling much of the city. The helots saw their chance and rose up. What followed was a rebellion so serious it took the Spartans years and help from allied cities to fully put down. That uprising reshaped everything. Sparta doubled down on military readiness, not because they feared Athens or Persia most of all, but because they feared their own population. Meanwhile, on the international stage, tension with Athens was building towards something much bigger. Athens had a navy that ruled the seas and a growing empire funded by tribute from allied cities. Sparta had land power and a reputation that made enemies think twice. Two very different kinds of strength aimed at each other. By 431 BC,
That tension broke into open war. The Peloponnesian War would drag on for nearly 2 decades, reshaping the entire Greek world. For years, Sparta's army proved almost unbeatable on land, while Athens' fleet dominated at sea. Neither side could land a decisive blow. Sparta could march into Athenian territory and burn crops, but Athens simply retreated behind its famous long walls and waited them out, supplied by sea. It looked, for a long time, like a stalemate that could last forever. Then, in 425, on a small, unremarkable island called Sphacteria, something happened that should have been impossible. A force of Athenians trapped a group of Spartan soldiers, and when the fighting turned hopeless, those Spartans did something no one expected from the men raised to die rather than retreat. They surrendered.
Spartan soldiers did not surrender. That was the whole point of the culture. A Spartan mother's parting words to her son, marching off to war, were said to be simple: "Come back with your shield, or on it," meaning win or die, not this. But on Sphacteria, roughly 120 Spartan hoplites, cut off, outnumbered, and pinned down by javelin and arrow fire they had no answer for, laid down their weapons and walked into captivity. The shock waves hit far harder than the military loss itself. For the rest of the Greek world, it proved something almost unthinkable. Spartans could be beaten, and Spartans could break. Athens took the prisoners back to their city and made a chilling threat: surrender the war or the captives die. For the first time, Sparta wasn't dictating the terms. So how did it actually happen? How did the most feared infantry in Greece end up disarmed on a strip of scrubland? The answer comes down to terrain and tactics. Sphacteria wasn't open ground suited for the phalanx. It was rocky, uneven, and thick with brush. Exactly the kind of battlefield where tight shield formations fell apart. The Athenians didn't send hoplites to meet the Spartans shield to shield. They sent lightly armored skirmishers with javelins and slings, men who could dart in, throw, and retreat before a heavy Spartan soldier in bronze armor could ever close the distance. Picture it. Men trained since childhood to stand their ground in a locked shield wall, suddenly surrounded by an enemy that refused to stand and fight at all. Every advantage the Spartan system had built for a lifetime became useless in that terrain. Against that tactic, it was a lesson the rest of Greece absorbed instantly. Sparta's aura of invincibility, built over generations, had a hole in it, and now everyone had seen it. Sparta eventually recovered its footing. Years later, with Persian gold funding a navy it had never possessed before, Sparta managed to challenge Athens at sea too, and by 404 BC, Athens finally fell. Sparta stood as the dominant power in Greece. Historians still debate how much Sphacteria actually mattered in that final outcome, versus how much it simply exposed a myth that was always more fragile than it looked. What's not disputed is this: the war Sparta eventually won cost it something it could never fully rebuild. Its own population of full citizens, already small, kept shrinking with every campaign, every casualty, every year of a system that demanded everything and replaced almost nothing.
Sparta's victory in 404 BC didn't start a new golden age. It started a countdown. The city that had built the most feared army in the Greek world had done it on the back of a citizen class that could never replace itself fast enough. By the time of the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, less than 40 years after defeating Athens, Sparta could field a fraction of the soldiers it once had. Boeotian forces under a commander named Epaminondas met the Spartan phalanx head-on, using a new formation that concentrated overwhelming force at a single point instead of spreading evenly across the line. The wall of shields that had held for generations broke in an afternoon. Sparta never recovered its old dominance after that. The system, built to produce 8,000 of the finest soldiers on Earth, had, by its own design, made sure there could never be enough of them. Remember those 300 men from the start of this story, the ones who knew they wouldn't survive the week and stayed anyway? That wasn't a myth built for a movie screen. It was the entire Spartan philosophy in miniature. The individual mattered less than the line, and the line had to hold no matter the cost. For a couple of centuries, that philosophy built something the ancient world had never seen. And in the end, that same philosophy made sure it couldn't last. So the next time you hear Spartan used to describe someone tough, disciplined, unbreakable, maybe ask yourself what that word actually cost the people who lived it.